On the other video, we learned how to graph using X and Y intercepts, right? And it's actually faster in graphing using an XY table, because if you're using an XY table, you got to get the Y by itself. You got to draw your XY table. You got to plug in numbers like 0, 1, and 2, and it's more work. Right here, you only do two things: X-int, Y-int. How do you find the X-intercept? Set Y equal to 0, plug it in, solve, you get an answer. That tells you where it crosses the Y-axis. Over here, you fire the Y-intercept, you set X equal to 0, plug in 0 for X, it's right there, you solve it, you get an answer, that's your Y-intercept. If you have your X and your Y, you draw your line, and you're done graphing. So, let's move on to this part down here, because these are also possible questions on tomorrow's quiz. Before we even begin, I'll tell you what, we could scratch out number 6 and 7. Let's just scratch those out. 6 and 7, we're going to cross them out. We're going to do those probably next week, not today. So, number 1, I could ask you to find the Y-intercept of this equation, just the Y-intercept, not the X and the Y, just the Y-intercept. So when we see that we need to find just the Y-intercept, what do we need to do? We need to set X equal to 0. That's what we need to do. We need to set X equal to 0. So our equation, we're going to set the X equal to 0, and we're going to solve it. So you could even do this right here. So you could just change that Y to a 0. Actually, we're changing the X to a 0. So change that X to a 0. So that's really going to be a negative 9 times 0. And we already know that that's just 0. So you really have 8Y equals 16. And if you divide by 8 and divide by 8, you'll get Y equals 2. And ladies and gentlemen, that's your Y-intercept value. Okay? Now let's say you were taking a multiple choice test and they actually gave you the coordinates of this Y-intercept. As a coordinate, you would say the X value is 0 and the Y value is 2. After all, you set X equal to 0 to find that your Y value is 2. Okay? So they might ask you for both the X and the Y-intercept. They might ask you just for the Y-intercept or just for the X-intercept. Or they might ask you to rewrite the following equation in standard form. So this equation is not in standard form. We'd have to get rid of the fraction, and we also have to get the X and the Y to one side. So let's multiply everything by 3 to get rid of the 2/3. We're going to end up with 12X minus 3 equals 2Y. And we're also going to subtract 2Y and subtract 2Y, because remember, standard form is AX plus BY equals C. So I'm going to move my Y value to the left side. So my new equation will be 12X minus 2Y minus 3, and of course it's still equal to 0. So for my final step, I'd have to move the C value over to the other side. So my final standard form equation would be 12X minus 2Y equals 3. And there will be several of these questions where I tell you to take the equation and write it in function form. That means get Y by itself. Or I might tell you to take the equation that's in function form and change it to standard form. And that would be X and Y on the left side with the number on the right side. So be ready for all that on tomorrow's quiz. Tomorrow's quiz is a little different because we haven't really had homework worksheets on this stuff. You've only had notes that have been printed out to you and videos. So the questions are coming straight from these notes and from the videos. Number 3, find the X-intercept of this line. So on number 3, it says find the X-intercept. The X-intercept, how do we do that? You set y equal to 0 and solve. So for the X-intercept, we're going to set y equal to 0, and we're going to solve. So I'm going to go to my y value and put a 0 right there. So this is going to say negative 7x plus 13. We said y is 0, so I'm going to put a 0 in there. 13 times 0 equals, let me go back to black, equals negative 28. So the 13 times 0 cancels out. So you really just have negative 7x equals negative 28. At that point, just divide by negative 7. Divide by negative 7. You'll have x equals positive 4. And that's your X-intercept. If they asked you it as a coordinate, what would the coordinate be? I mean, you could visualize it and see, okay, on the x-axis, it's going to cross at 4 right here. What's that coordinate? You don't even have to visualize because you know it's going to be a coordinate. You know that your x value is 4, and you know that you set y equal to 0 to be able to find that X-intercept value. So the coordinate is 4, 0. And that's this point right here, 4, 0. Get it? These questions will be on tomorrow's quiz. Number 4 says write the equation of the line that has a y-intercept at negative 2 and does not have an x-intercept. Okay, so we kind of need to go back and remember what we learned yesterday, or not yesterday, a couple of days ago when we graphed. Remember, if you have x equals a number, what kind of graph does that produce? A horizontal line or a vertical line? X equals number produces a vertical line. Y equals number produces a horizontal line. So let's first understand what they're asking us right here. It says write an equation of a line that has a y-intercept at negative 2. Okay, so to visualize it, I'm going to draw an xy plane, and the y-intercept is at negative 2. Here's my y, here's negative 1, here's negative 2. My line crosses through right there. That's my y-intercept. What's the x-intercept? What does it say? It does not have an x-intercept. So what does that line have to look like if it doesn't have an x-intercept? It has to be horizontal. It's not going to cross the x-axis. Now we learned a couple of days ago that these lines that are horizontal, is it x equals a number or y equals a number? Anybody? X equals a number or y equals a number? Y equals, and in this case, negative 2. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an equation that produces a horizontal line at y equals negative 2. Let's do number 5. It says write an equation of a line that has the x-intercept of negative 1. So again, I'm going to draw it. Here's my x, here's my y. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, okay? So x-intercept of negative 1, it crosses right here. And what's the y-intercept? It says it does not have a y-intercept. So it must be going perfectly vertical, straight up and down. Make sense? It won't cross the y. So if they're asking me to write an equation of a vertical line, I know that those vertical lines all come from the equation x equals a number. And what does that number have to be? Negative 2. Oh, I'm sorry. Negative 1. My bad. And that wraps up this video. Remember, tomorrow's quiz, let me just get this out of the way here. Tomorrow's quiz is going to be on... Okay, guys, so tomorrow's quiz will have questions like rewrite in function form. So how would I rewrite this in function form? You'd have to get y by itself. So you first get rid of the 8. Then you would have negative 2y equals x plus 8. And then you would divide by negative 2. And you'd have y equals, there's really a 1 right here, so that'd be a negative 1/2 x minus 4. That's one type of question that you're going to have on tomorrow's quiz. So another type of question might not be for you to rewrite it in function form. It might be for you to rewrite it in standard form. So going back to the original one, let me change that from rewrite in function to rewrite in standard. So if it says rewrite in standard form, you want ax plus by equals c, and you do not want fractions. So I would subtract x, you'd have negative x minus 8 minus 2y equals 0, and then I would move the 8 over by adding 8, you'd have negative x minus 2y equals 8, and that's an acceptable answer. Again, some math teachers prefer the a value to be positive, so another answer that would be good, I'm going to put in this box right here, a positive x plus 2y equals negative 8. So that's another type of question that you could have on tomorrow's quiz. I could also give you an equation, tell you to rewrite it in function form. So let's just give you a function form equation here. Y equals 2/3 x minus 1. I could tell you to graph that thing using an XY table. So on your quiz tomorrow, you're going to have to do an XY table, and you're going to have to know what to plug in for your inputs. So 0 always works, but instead of 1, what are you going to use? 3, and you could also use negative 3 because I want to give you small graphs tomorrow. So that the 0 works great because 2/3 times 0 minus 1 is just going to be a minus 1. You don't even have to show your work right there. The 3 is also easy because when you plug in the 3's cancel and you have 2 minus 1 and your answer is just 1. So you get a positive 1 as your output. And your negative 3 is also easy. You have 2/3 times negative 3 minus 1. So the 3's cancel, but that's really a negative 1 in there. So you have 2 times negative 1, that's negative 2 minus 1, that gives you a negative 3. And you have your 3 coordinates, and you just graph them and draw your line, and that's definitely going to be on tomorrow's quiz also. Of course, I'm also going to give you some where you have to find the x and y intercepts. Maybe you could do the x and y intercepts and then graph it. That way you could graph on a graph with your x and y intercepts instead of finding 3 coordinates. So all of that stuff's going to come out on tomorrow's quiz. And we're also going to have slope on tomorrow's quiz and the slope formula. So let's move on to the next video that shows us slope and slope formula.